Hi, I'm Eloise De Leon.
And I'm Christine Chupek, and this is The Heart Glow.
Our guest today is Xochitl Codina, a queer indigenous Chicana, artist, healer, raised on the tribal land of Yanaguana, now known as San Antonio. She is reclaiming traditional ecological knowledge and traditional ancestral medicine. Founder of Xochitl Holistics and Huitzilli Wear, they are an artist, organic gardener, holistic health practitioner, and an acupuncturist in training at Texas Health and Science University San Antonio. Raised in Yanaguana among artists and activists for social and environmental justice, creating a foundation towards their life's path in environmental sustainability and holistic community care.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Eloise and Christine, for having me. I'm really excited to be here and share and connect with your community on the podcast.
It's great to have you here.
Very excited to have you.
So would you like to begin to tell us a little bit about yourself? And it doesn't have to be a linear thing. You can start with your childhood, and you don't have to. You can start at any point in your life or with any project you'd like to describe.
Thank you. Sure, yes. I am currently here in San Antonio in Yanaguana. I was raised here. My family's originally from Texas for many, many generations. And on my mother's side, we do have Nde ancestry, which is Apache. Um, and other regions in Mexico are with the lineages that my parents come from. Um, and I was really, really privileged to be raised by my parents who were a part of the Chicana movement and very socially conscious, politically conscious. And they chose to raise their family in San Antonio. Um, and so I was able to grow up around some really wonderful organizations and community spaces. Although I didn't have my blood extended family um, with us during like family times, we often had like artist activist friends around with us, so we could our lives felt very like full and vibrant all the time and well loved. And my parents were well loved too for their own journeys. So that was really beautiful to see my parents supported in their pathways, with surrounding themselves too with good people for them that then welcomed us and embraced us for all of the interesting ways that me and my sister would grow into. Um, so one of the things that I remember that is a big influence on my own like self-expression and way of connecting with own um, my own body, my own wellness is through dance, and specifically a few forms of dance that are more particular to a Mexican American community and culture. Was folklorico dance, which is traditional Mexican folk dancing. I was a part of a dance company here called Navarro since I was 9 years old, um, with under the direction of Pete Ramirez, who was an incredible teacher. I believe he was also queer, although during those times in the 80s that I was growing up, like that wasn't such an idea that was very easily accepted amongst the community. So, um, it was never explicitly said or expressed, but that's what kind of the rumors that we heard. So I felt really comfortable with him, and I loved how he was able to embody and show us the dance parts for both the male and the female um, parts of dancing. So I saw one person embodying both. He would put on a skirt, a flocorico skirt sometimes, and show us the dance moves with the footwork as well as the skirt work. And it was no big deal, you know. Sometimes he would have other assistants helping. Um, but I grew up um, just learning that like discipline of repeated practice and then growing, building on that so you could grow to put on a performance. So we often would perform um, for the tourist community as well. Here in San Antonio, it's a big tourist city. So we're out there performing at the Market Square and at the Arneson River Theater, at the Fiesta parades, as well as even people's quinceañeras and weddings. And other small community events. So I was performing on stage since I was 9 years old with this dance company. And I noticed since then that I didn't like solos. I never wanted to try out for any solo parts. I much rather enjoy being part of a group, learning to dance together, and just being a part of a group that moves in like beautiful artful ways. And it helped me to learn a little bit more about our like Mexican culture, about the different states of Mexico, because this is all information we were not getting in schools. This is not anything we're ever really taught in, especially elementary, middle school. I believe now that there is some Mexican American studies classes for the 12 that they are teaching some things, but as you may have heard, like there's a lot of um, backlash and oppression happening in Texas around education and so many other things. There's a lot of defunding around diversity, inclusion, equity. There's fights to shut down ethnic studies, even at the college level, um, and the fight for ethnic studies within K through 12 is a big one. Um, so often my parents, I think, recognize that institutions like that the state offers are usually not going to teach us what we need to know. So they often had us involved in community spaces that were teaching us about our culture, about our spirituality, about our environment, about where we came from, the history of Texas, the history of, you know, our family and why we are the way we are. You know, my mother's side, my grandmother, Eufrasia Codina, Eufrasia Parra. She is, she was originally from Cotulla, Texas, and migrated up to Michigan with her family at a young age. I believe she was under 20. Um, and they would migrate back and forth between Texas and Michigan often. And then eventually they settled in Michigan permanently. And my mom was born there in Michigan. Um, so they worked in the factories as well as in the fields. And my mother, too, as a child, worked in both. Um, and so my mom grew up there in the Midwest. And I think after she had the opportunity to figure out where she wanted to go in life, that once she met my father, um, who was also from Texas, they made that choice for them to move back to Texas and raise their family here, so that you know we would be raised in a community and culture that was more supportive to an extent um, than what she was experiencing in the Midwest. She experienced a lot of racism, a lot of violence towards who she was as a woman and who she was as a working class Mexican American woman as well. Um, she's told me stories about just a lot of stories that were hard for her. So she's also shared with me how she has healed from those things and her journey and her own reclamation of her own self, her own autonomy, her own culture, and healing ways. So it was through my mother that we joined later in life. She joined an Aztec dance group and also was a part of several like women's circles and women's gatherings. Um, Alma de Mujer was a place that she would go to, and
Let's just stop for a moment. There.
so I just want to also share just my mother is very strong, and I'm just grateful for a lot of her teachings and seeing her pathway of her own healing. And through dance, she introduced us and brought us closer to an Aztec dance group here locally in San Antonio. And so I joined with her and my family. I think I was around 19 at that point. I had been dancing folklorico consistently through my young life as a child, and I think I took a little break, like after um, after college, maybe, um, with performing, and then I started joining and dancing more with our local group, Shinashli, here in San Antonio, and it was a very interesting process for me. I was in a way intimidated by the just amount of commitment and just so much energy that is required to be a part. It's like we were just taught like this is a big commitment, not something to be taken lightly. So I just was supporting, and I would go to our night velaciones, which are the night ceremonies where we would pray and sing songs and work with our and creating an altar with flowers and candles and um, different deities, creating forms of on the ground with flowers, building them in community in partnership with somebody else. So, um, songs and the copal burning. So I did that for about 4 years before I decided to start dancing in the day. So I did the night journey for about 4 years. And I was in my early 20s, and one of the comadritas, she was the samadora for the group, who was originally from Mexico. She was from Cuernavaca area. She was my mom's friend, and she took me under her wing for a little while and took me to Mexico with her on trips to do ceremony over there. And I think at that point, that's when I finally was like, okay, I can do this. I can dance also. Um, just seeing how big the community was in Mexico and just meeting so many other young people my age who are dancing and um, being able to go and explore with them like beautiful sacred sites and meeting all these jefes and important religious spiritual leaders and listening to them speak. It was really beautiful for me. It was really hard. We often had to take buses for hours and carrying our things and sleeping on floors, sleeping on the petates, like the one I have behind me, staying up all night in ceremony. Um, but I was young, so I could do it. And yeah, it was fun. I got to get out of San Antonio and just connect with more of our culture. So when I came back is when I started to like, I was like, okay, I'm ready to make my ayoyotes, which are mm, the ankle um, percussive sounds that you hear. They're rattle like mm, they're seeds that are dried, and we tie them together to leather. And there's 52 of them on each ankle to represent the cycle of the sun, um, and how many. It has all these mathematical things that it's so intense. All the knowledge, like it's so much information, and it's really beautiful. And I think I was just very intrigued and felt so connected with this spiritual practice because it was, math and science as well as nature based, um, and our culture and having it, helping this culture to continue despite colonization, despite conquest, despite borders, um, just being a part of that process. And it was really beautiful. I got to go on a lot of really wonderful trips. One year I went with the jefa from Mexico, and she took me to Oaxaca for a curanderismo gathering up in the hills in Huautla. And I remember at the time, like my Spanish still isn't the best, um, but I tried my best to understand as much as I could from that gathering. And it's the birthplace of Maria Sabina,
Mhm.
and that was just really special to be in that space. And um, they took us out into the mountains and gathering herbal medicine, and it was just really beautiful. And I think I've definitely been very grateful and privileged to go on these experiences in my early 20s. I think the internet was just coming out. Like, I remember having an email address, you know, um, so we didn't have the connectivity that we do now. So it was all through personal connections, a lot of the opportunities that I had to learn more. Um, Another event in my early 20s that happened was there still is a newspaper called Indian Country Today. And I remember reading it one day and seeing a advertisement for an indigenous permaculture course that was going to be happening in New Mexico. And I was so excited about it. And I was like, how am I going to get there? And I sent them a message and I wrote to them. And I think it was, I don't remember how much it was, like $500 or something. And like, I was, going to school and like working part time. And I was like, I don't really have money for all these things. But they were like, just come, Sochi, just come. We would love to have you. There's work study available. Just if you can gather any funds, ask for donations, and we'll welcome you when you come. Like it's gonna be camping, but we'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about food or lodging when you're here. We'll take care of you. And I was like, okay. And it just so happened that a friend of mine was driving out to El Paso to meet her family at that same time that the gathering was going to happen. So I asked her for a ride, and so we rode out to El Paso. And I was like, if I can get to El Paso, then I can take a bus at least into the rest of the part into New Mexico. And so that's what we did. And once I got to New Mexico, there was a jefe of danza there that I had reached out to, and they welcomed me, and I was able to stay with them. And they dropped me off at the gathering in Chimayo. That's where the gathering was at. And so this, yeah, it was just a beautiful experience. I think I was there maybe, I don't know, it felt a very long time. Maybe it was only a week, maybe it was 2 weeks. But we got to connect with indigenous people from all over the US. There was folks from Canada. There were some people from Belize. Just learning how to work with the energies of the earth and the cycles of the water. How to, plant different plants and companion together. About mushrooms and I don't know. It was a lot, and it was really beautiful, and I just felt at home. Finally, I was in a place where all of my interests were in one place, and all of who I was like being reflected back around me, and that was so special. And at the end of the gathering, the jefe from the danza asked me, he was like, "Would you have anything else to do?" And I was like, besides go home? He's like, "Well, we need you to do something else." I was like, okay. I was like, let me just ask my family if I can stay out here longer. And my parents are super supportive, of course. And they're like, yes, go ahead and stay out there. Like, we trust the danza community to take care of you in a good way. So they asked me to help host and take our heifer from Mexico City to guide her and be a translator for her at this other gathering up in Montana. And it was a gathering of elders, indigenous elders, and they asked me to help translate. And there was this young Danzante who also wanted to go, and he was 10 years old. And the parents were like, he really, really wants to go, and we can't go. Can you help take care of him too? And I was just like, okay. I mean, I don't know. I was just up for whatever at that age. So it was really special to, they said, oh, you have to bring your regalia for the entrance dance. And I was like, well, I don't have any of my danza stuff. And they're like, fine, well, you can borrow our stuff and that's okay. And, you just assist the jefa and this young child. I think his name was Cuauhtemoc also. So Xochitl and Cuauhtemoc, were assisting our jefa Dora from Mexico to take her to Montana. And it was really beautiful. We got to stay in teepees and see these bison, and it was beautiful gatherings at nighttime. All these discussions, I got to see our, indigenous family members, like they were doing their traditional dancing from like all these different parts of the US, from the Seminole from Florida, Pueblo dancing. Like I had never seen any of that. And that was so incredibly, like I was just blown away and so honored just to be there. yeah, I mean, it was in my early 20s and I just didn't believe all these things were happening. Um, I just kept believing San Antonio and I'd come back and then another opportunity would surface and I'd be asked to go somewhere or, help out, or I saw an opportunity and I would just go. I would just go. Um, and locally there was Alma de Mujer was a space that my mom was going to. And at the time I was working for the Esperanza Center as part of their youth program. And they had a gathering with the curandera from Oaxaca, Doña Enriqueta, um, was visiting. And so they sent me to that gathering. And I think around that time is when I started to get much more into herbal medicine. I was experiencing a lot of menstruation issues, a lot of heavy bleeding and cramps and um, acne and just very, very, it was really hard and like a lot of discomfort. Um, it would knock me out for days. And, I remember going to Western medicine and they just wanted to put me on birth control. And I was determined to figure out something else for myself. And I think it's when I started researching and trying to figure out, supplements and vitamins or herbs or something else to help me um, with all of that. And so I remember going to Sprouts, and my parents were very supportive, fortunately. Like, I know there's so many other people who didn't have the opportunity where their parents were so supportive. Um, but I remember telling my family, like, I want to be vegetarian and I don't want to drink milk anymore. And, um, I want to take these, like, I would make them take me to Sprouts and to go get like natural body care products and certain herbs, supplement herbs. Um, and this was in the like late 90s when this happened. So yeah, I think that's when I started really getting into herbal medicine and just trying to understand, learn. And then since then, any opportunity I found in our space here in San Antonio or elsewhere, I just gobbled it up as much as I could. There is an herbalist here in San Antonio. His name was Don Madrigal. And I just remember he just had this greenhouse and all these herbal medicine. He was always making all these tonics, and he did a few classes here and there. Um, he was a fascinating person. I was working at the Esperanza Center too for a long time. It is a mostly queer-led space, Chicana queer-led space. That's an artist activist space. Um, I help to there was often plays and musical performances and um, book readings from all these intellectual, very progressive people. Film screenings. I think they had me as one of the jurors for some of their film festivals. It was the Other America Film Festival and In and Out Festival or something. So I don't know. I think now I think back about that, I'm just like, wow, like that was a lot of opportunity I had. So I learned how to do lighting and sound and computer graphic things because I was just there and I had the time and the ability to do that and support of parents. Um, so I could grow and learn a lot of hands-on skills to help our community, you know. There's Cherry Moraga, there was just all these amazing artists. I just can't even remember them all right now, but it was really, really amazing to just have such a rich um, space to grow up in. I think my mom forced me to volunteer with them since I was in middle school. Um, and then later I was applied for their like youth internship program, um, so I could be a part of their programs. I guess it was in the summers they did that. Um, I often feel like other people, they just maybe didn't have the support of their parents or their families, or it just felt natural because my families were already involved. My mom was already volunteering with these spaces, you know, helping on these different committees and Women's Day March committees and anti-war protests, and you know, they were already involved. So it was just like, well, yeah, that's what you do. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Like, be involved in these things. Like, I don't know. I remember having other friends that would want to go bowling or watching, I don't know, silly movies at the movies. And I would go. And I remember trying to invite them to come to participate in the things I was involved with. Yep, I was dancing a lot. I was performing with the folklorico until I was in my 20s. Then I went to college and I danced a little bit more with them. And then around, also maybe in my mid 20s, I started working at Santuario Sister Farm, and it, it's no longer around here, but it was run by these radical Dominican nuns, and it was like a retreat space and like a kind of like a model of, or like organic gardening and kind of like a closed systems of gray water system, water catchment system. So I remember there was like a 5,000 gallon water catchment tank on the property, and the gray water would flow underground into these other garden areas and feed like this small pond. And we were just trying to help things grow, and we grew vegetables and herbs, and you know, I was learning how to cook certain recipes with them, and that was really, really nice. I was going to college, and so I would part time. I think I was only able to do college part time because I just needed so much hands on skill building that I couldn't just do academia and just reading and writing and lecture all the time. I don't do well in those settings. I need a lot of hands-on physical learning, and that's what I was doing. So in college, I was going to school for environmental studies. So um, I was able then to do like my projects were often in support of the Santuario Sister Farm. My new research I was doing for school was just, you know, putting into um, putting into practice whatever I was learning at school to help them in their projects. So that was really wonderful. And then I graduated college and I fell in love and I moved to California. I was ready to leave Texas too, to just have other opportunities and um, live my queer life in California. And in California is where I met Eloise. later on through mutual friends and just other gatherings with other healers and energy healers, and I just always needed to find my spiritual family, right? My family of healers and folks who were working towards all of these things to help our community, whether it was through holistic healing things or through gardening with healthy foods or just connecting with nature in different ways. Like I always needed to find those people wherever I went. And I was really grateful to then learn about all of the California plants and get to know those relatives that were surrounding me in the canyons and, you know, growing in my yard or just seeing them in the environment. And because they were so different, they were very different from our Texas plants. Here we have a lot of pecan and oak and acorns and limestone. We have a lot of underground aquifers and artisanal springs. So more like there's more rain here in Texas, but it gets hotter and the winters are colder. So the extremes are more extreme here in Texas than in California. In Southern California was just felt like spring year round. I was cold the first few years all the time. I always had a jacket even in the summer. I remember thinking, when is the summer gonna happen? When is it gonna get hot? When can I get in the water and cool off? And I was like, oh, it doesn't happen till September. Can you get into that frigid cold water and cool off? So that was an adjustment for sure. It's just getting used to that shift. I remember craving the intense heat of the Texas, where it warms you down to your bones and you're just sweating. Like you don't even need to go to sweat lodge. Like you just be outside and do some garden work and it's fine because it's so humid. And the thunderstorms, that's what I missed a lot. So we've just had some thunderstorms coming through at night recently, and it's just a very peaceful sound. And then our chicharas during the day, also like they're just so calming. Some people, not everybody likes that sound, but it just reminds me of home.
Are those the crickets?
Chicharas are cicadas.
Ah.
So they are insects that live underground for years, and then during full moons, they come out and shed their skins and leave their skins like on the tree trunks and plants. And then they have their wings, and they're these beautiful metallic green, and then they fly off and they just live for the season. They lay their eggs and die at the end of the season. Um, but yeah, they're very beautiful to see that cycle of metamorphosis and like how the full moon brings that out for them. Yeah.
So did you miss home while you were in San Diego?
Yeah, I missed home a lot. I wish I could blend the two cities of San Antonio and San Diego. I would only come back maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. And then other trips I would just explore California or explore into Mexico.
And you were getting into jewelry making too, right? At that time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I started doing that. Well, as a child, I worked with small beads and I was making a lot of small bead jewelry since I was a teenager. And then I think I learned how to do like basic wire wrapping and working with stones. Um, there in California, some friends would make jewelry, and um, I asked if they could show me just how to use a little bit of the wire to put things together. And since then, I've been able to continue growing in that. I would just really love working with the natural elements, like finding shells or piece feathers to put together. Also going to like bead stores or bead just traveling bead places, or when I would travel to other places collecting um the stone jewelry that they had there, and like taking them apart and putting things together again. Recycling, upcycling. I'd go to thrift stores at times, and it'd be just pieces that I would gather and repurpose them. Old jewelry that my mom gave me, and I would make new things with them. Um,
And as a danzante, were you also making the outfits that you would wear?
yeah, so the sewing, you're supposed to work on your first vestuario yourself. And so those first ones I sewed with my mom. She would help me sew and create those outfits when I was younger. And then in San Diego, with our jefa Eva, she would help us sew new things. Um, and collecting the feathers and creating the designs. And so I think just that influence of being in that community, a lot of my jewelry is um, more indigenous aesthetic. I love using the feathers from any colorful feathers I can find, really. People's pet birds, they like gift me things, or I gather on my walks if I find things, or um, but the sewing, like, it's not something I pursued on my own a lot, because I feel like it's a lot. It's a big commitment. You have to have all the supplies and sitting on hours on end. I think I just lean more towards the jewelry making. That's what I really like doing. There in California is where I learned also to work with the feathers to make feather earrings, and um, how to process them and how to put them, shave them down, or shape them so that they could fit together. And I'm still learning. I want to learn how to make fans, and I want to learn how to, I don't know, continue working with more materials. Now that I'm back here in San Antonio, I work a lot with the mezcal bean, which is the Texas mountain laurel um, seed, and in they're a bright red seed with a very hard shell, and traditionally they were used as part of a concoction that the sacred people, the medicine people, would use to get into altered states, and connect with other dimensions. Um, but I don't know if that process is known. I don't know. I haven't tried to find that out. I've just always been told to be really careful with them because they're considered toxic or hallucinogenic. So when you work with them, as I'm drilling, I have to wear a mask, so I'm not inhaling things. Um, but it's been really cool to work with those seeds, because they're everywhere, but at the same time, they're still very sacred and special with how they were used in the past. And so for me, they're like a talisman in that way, that they're used for protection and just used to connect with the other dimensions. And I've noticed the the quality of them change depending on where they're growing and how old the tree is. So there's some spaces here in San Antonio that these trees are probably hundreds of years old. I don't know. And their seeds, the color pigment has shifted. They've lost more of the red, and so they're shifting more towards like the orange, like this one, or more yellow. And those are more prized in other communities, I believe, like the Cherokees and other folks like in Oklahoma. They really prize the more yellows and oranges. And to me, that indicates like this is an elder tree. So it has much more knowledge and much more experience of being on this earth. And so that's their seed that they're gifting. So that's the energy that they carry. Um, yeah, so it's been nice. Like my meditative walks that I do with connecting with the elements here back at home, with the trees and the plants, reconnecting with the plants has been the process for me. I've moved back from California about 4 years ago. Um, I just felt like this calling to come back home, and I had already gone through a divorce and separations and trying to figure out if I should stay in California or come back home. And I did feel this call to come back home and um, reconnect with my family, like my sister and my parents. And my parents were getting older, and so I wanted to um, be there with them. I didn't know how much longer I would have with them. We were separated for about 15 years when I was out there. So um, I was coming back a lot. I think it was in 2018. And then I decided I wanted to move back. And so my sister helped me. She flew out to California, helped me pack up my things, and we drove cross country to come back to Texas. And there's this freak like blizzard all the way down into southern Arizona. And we were driving through snow in southern Arizona. And that was wild. It snowed the entire time from like New Mexico, Arizona until we got to El Paso. And that was so weird. Um, and yeah, I moved back, and then unfortunately, my father passed 6 weeks later from a sudden heart attack. Nobody was prepared, nobody was expecting that, and it just put us all into a shock. And I just kind of cocooned for the rest of that year. There was a lot to readjust to coming back to Texas. In a lot of ways, I feel like I was coming, like, went back in time because of the politics here. Um, and I just didn't have access to the same, like, farmers markets and organic foods everywhere and healthy eating options and just so many things that I was really getting used to in California that just it's such a struggle for that to thrive here for many reasons. And I went into a pretty deep depression that year. It was really hard, and walking helped. Just getting out in nature again and just praying with the elements, um, asking them to hold my heavy emotions, and going to the springs, all of our sacred springs here in our region. This is water that's hundreds, if not thousands of years old that comes out of the spring heads. Trying my best with all of that. And um, then when I was starting to feel better, the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And there was just so much stress and chaos and fear everywhere. And within the first few weeks, a friend of mine from California, she was a doula. Here in San Antonio, like people get together a lot. They gather a lot. There's big families here. Everybody's gets together for birthday parties and festivities or just the weekend. There's big, carne asadas and barbecues, and it's just so communal. And I know that was really hard for a lot of people to stay away. And if they didn't, everybody got sick. Everybody got sick. I lost a coworker. I lost a spiritual elder.
My gosh.
I mean, luckily, like when our family got sick, like we all made it through, and other friends, but not everybody did. So it's been an interesting 4 years being back. And I feel like now people are coming together in a lot of ways and having ceremony again, because our ceremonies, a lot of people stopped gathering for ceremony, and that was really hard because our spiritual practice is so communal.
Were
So
you
that was,
already on the path as a healer at that point?
yes, I believe I made that very clear choice in California. I think I was around 36 years old. Um, there was like a recession happening there, and I remember getting laid off from work, and I had been doing working with affordable housing and uh, a lot of community work with refugees and immigrant families, and it was very stressful and it was a lot for me, and I just remember thinking, well, here's my chance to do something, figure out what I want to do that suits my personal being a little bit better. That's not so hard for me. And I was thinking, I was like, I prefer one-on-ones versus having to work with 30 kids and 100 families. I want my work environment to feel calm and not so hectic and chaotic, or high stress and crisis mode all the time. Because I was getting sicker as well. I was starting to get sicker. I wasn't feeling well and all these things. So I got some funding through like workforce development funds during that recession period to go to massage school. So I joined and went to massage school. And it was very healing, very, very healing for me. And it just calmed down my nervous system and helped me connect energetically with myself and what I was doing, how I was interacting and my own energetic boundaries. I think I didn't understand that before, how I was absorbing so much or getting too connected with others, things. So during that time, I also was being able to learn from others, more of our traditional Mexican healing modalities with sobadas and matriz, the rebozo work, bajos, learning about herbal steams for um, pelvic health, and all of those wonderful healing modalities for women's health. And that's the pathway I started going down those like last several years in California. and connecting with, a lot of great people in birth work. And I went to a birth work training in Long Beach, um, Birth Workers of Color Collective, and and their perspective is exactly what, a reflection of who I am as a queer person, as a spiritual person, and connecting with our ancestral um, traditions. And it was a beautiful gathering of folks that were honoring their ancestral teachings from Asia or from Africa, the Mexican cultures, and everybody was just, it was so beautiful. It was a spiritual gathering as well as just learning basic foundational information on how to support birthing people. It was the language of LGBTQ families was centered. Um, it was perfect. It was so beautiful. There was no need to like translate or block out things that didn't resonate because it was all there. Um, so I continued helping to support people pre and post natal. I didn't attend births in person there, but I helped a lot with fertility as well as pregnancy, and then the post support with nutritional foods, nourishing traditional foods, um, belly binding, massage for the belly, to acomodar la matriz, to help get the organs back in place. And I was doing all this work, and there was a time, I think my family, my sister were like wanting me to go with my mom back up to Michigan to go visit her family, and my mom wanted us to drive her back and forth is what she was wanting at the time. So there was a time that I was back in Michigan with my mom's family, and I was talking to my tia, and she was like, "What are you up to lately, mija?" And I was like, um, well, this is what I'm doing. I'm like, I know I went to college for this one thing, but this is what I'm doing right now. And I was telling her about the traditional Mexican practices. And she looks at me and she's like, "Mija, that's what your grandma did."
Oh my gosh.
She's she said, um, that she would take care of the families in the community and the new, new parents, and that she would take them food and she would wrap them and massage them and pray with them. And I was like, what? Nobody told me that. um, and that my own tia, she herself, that my grandma wrapped her. And I asked about my mom, but my mom, what happened to my mom? She didn't wrap my mom. And she says, no, Mija, she didn't. She didn't wrap her. She had a cesarean section. So maybe she didn't know how to support her because, that was a newer technology that she didn't know how to accommodate as much. But I know that I was born in Michigan because my parents met in San Diego, and then they moved to Michigan, and then they went back to school. I went to college in Michigan, and so I was born there, and my mom got her teaching credentials, and my dad was working on his PhD there. And then when I was 4 years old, we moved to San Antonio. So during those first early years, um, my grandma helped to take care of me a little bit, and other memories are just being on the University of Michigan campus, like in the student housing. I remember having other international student kids to play with. Um, so it was just getting back to the story with my tia. Because I didn't grow up with hearing a lot of stories about or knowing everything about my grandma, um, was really moving for me. It was really, really moving just to know that somehow or another, like I still ended up continuing that tradition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful as you've been telling your story throughout the podcast of how many invitations you've had through your life, where it was like the next invitation to the next, and how open you were to just say, yes, let's see where that goes. Yes, let's go there. This is really beautiful to see that, and kind of led you down the path that was already deeply rooted in your family. That's
Yeah.
that's such a wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful life and experience so far.
Yes, I've been just really grateful along the process, and often like just shocked of the opportunity. Like once I'm there, I'm still like feels so surreal. Um, and I'm really grateful for them. And I, hope and continue to welcome those opportunities and continue to share. And so that's, what I'm trying to do a little bit more often is sharing back with folks what I've been learning. So it's been very intergenerational. I've been sharing with elders who didn't get to learn things, working with the plants or how to um, make things that are herbal based. Like there's a few things have been passed down in certain families, but not the deep, deep knowledge. Um, so that's been really beautiful to reconnect. Just a simple thing is building a smudge bundle, using the local herbs that we have to build and wrap um, these herbs, and that they could use then to bless themselves, bless their families, bless spaces, um, bless new beginnings, or clear out and saying goodbye and letting go to, that next that old phase, so that to welcome the new phase for people. Um, Herbal medicine making, I've been sharing massage techniques and postpartum things. I'm still trying to learn a lot so I can put it all together and continue sharing in different ways. Um, and I think that once I moved back here, my intent was to reconnect with what was here, what is a part of my DNA with, my family being here for generations. And then trying to help make this medicine accessible. Um, I think that is something that I struggle with sometimes because, we're not in the same kind of society where people take care of each other the same way. People aren't don't know to take care of their medicine people or their healers in the same way that, hundreds of years ago we did that. Um, so it's been an interesting journey about, accepting money for this work, because I was often taught along this pathway, don't charge, don't ask for money, just accept whatever people gift you. Um, so I've honored that as much as I could. Um, but how do you survive in a place where you have to pay rent and buy food. We don't always have access to land or in the same way. So while I was in California, I worked at integrative health clinics where there was acupuncture, massage, chiropractor, naturopathic doctors, all in one roof. So that felt really good for me to work in that kind of situation. And when I moved here to San Antonio and the pandemic hit, and I was like, well, I can't work doing massage. What am I going to do? Again, these big changes in economics. What am I going to do?
And
A lot of
why?
people
I'm sorry. Why couldn't you?
massage during the pandemic.
Oh, I see. Yes, of
I
course.
think, it was in some places closed down. I believe, in California, they were not even allowed to work for a long time. And it just, yeah, it was too dangerous, I felt, for me, especially in the early when we didn't really understand
Mhm.
anything and there was no vaccine either, so a lot of people I know were going back to school around that time, and my partner at the time also went back to school. And I don't like academia, and I was like, what can I do? And I was working at the public library at the time, and one of the librarians was like, oh, I just got acupuncture. I was like, oh, cool. I had been receiving acupuncture for 20 years in California, and I knew there's acupuncturists here. My mom would go to acupuncture here. But I was like, oh, where did you go? She's like, oh, there's a school here. I went to the student clinic. And I was like, what? There's a school? There's a school in San Antonio, not in Austin. She was like, no, it's just down the street. I was so shocked. I had no idea that San Antonio even had an acupuncture school. And I decided, like, right, like that's it. That's where I'm gonna go. Like that's the next step for me because I didn't know where else to go, and I wanted to still be able to continue doing healing work. So yeah, it's been really beautiful just being able to bring in all my other trainings and experience in with me in the clinic. I've done abdominal massage on people. I've even done rebozo work on people even as they're, during their acupuncture treatment, before, after. I've brought in my herbal medicine oils and my sprays, um, crystals sometimes. you know.
So we're getting close to the
Yeah,
end at this point, and I would like to ask you um, about the rebozo work. What does that involve?
sure. So the rebozos are a traditional woven cloth from Mexico made by folks. It's an very old tradition of weaving, and so there's a whole culture around that, many teachings around the rebozo. Um, it's a it's a sacred piece of clothing that people use in their daily life. Um, it's incorporated to just carry things, wrap yourself, adorn yourself, including carrying babies and wrapping your belly. Um, so there are techniques of how to wrap a pregnant belly to help support it, to help hold the weight and distribute the weight of it across the rest of your back and your body. There's also techniques that are used during labor to help release and open the space to allow baby to pass through. Um, and then once the birth has happened, there's ceremony to help to close the person up, because during birth, the birthing person is helping to bring forth a new life from the cosmos. So we're a vessel to help bring that new life onto the earth plane. And so that person is very open because they had to be open to channel that. And so one of the traditions is to help close the birthing person afterwards, and it's wrapping the person from head to toe and tightly close and tie and ground the person to help them come back into their bodies, to feel safe and to feel connected again, as well as physically to help the body um, come back into place, because with all of the hormones of relaxin, the body is opened up, um, bones have stretched further than they had been in the past, and so it actually helps to tighten the body back up so that there's not further pain in the back or the knees, different parts of the body that has pain when there's misalignment because there wasn't that process of putting them back together, as well as beyond birthing, that there's stretching involved with the rebozo, pulling, shaking, shimmering. Uh, um, it's called rebozo manteadas to help loosen muscles and the fascia of the body to help release and release those muscles. So those are techniques to use with low back pain, shoulder pain, um, also neck pain. There's a technique just wrapping the rebozo around your neck and your head and letting your head kind of shake and have a nice rhythm to help relax the body and release the muscle, the tension in the head. And then at the end, we close and put it tight so that you feel that pressure and knowing that you're coming back into yourself and in a good, strong, grounded space again.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful practice to learn and continue to practice and figuring out, how to do it for different conditions that come up and how to use your own body mechanics in a way that is going to benefit you and you're not going to injure yourself as well. And then passing that on again, because these are techniques and things that had to go into hiding or just weren't passed on due to assimilation and acculturation. They weren't valued in the past. Or by the outside dominant society, and so people recognize now like how powerful that these techniques are, these traditional ways of taking care of people, and people need them. There's a huge need and a huge call for people to come back to those teachings, and people want that.
Yeah.
It's like they remember it in some ways.
Mm.
Yeah, it's been beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been wonderful chatting with you, and I'm going to be watching to see what wonderful things you do next. I would love to stay connected, and so many things that you talked about and practices that people need now and are going to need your support and your help. It's going to be a great thing to see and watch. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your work that you're doing and really uplifting people's voices and all these wonderful things that a lot of people are doing,
Mhm.
um, to amplify that for people so we don't feel so alone, so we
Mhm.
don't feel so isolated, and just knowing that there's support out there and there's a community out there, and that it's growing.